Hello and welcome to DEI Advisors. My name is Lan Elliott on behalf of DEI Advisors, and today's advisor is Elie Maalouf, the CEO for the Americas at IHG Hotels and Resorts. And I am really proud to have had the opportunity to work with Elie in the past. So I know firsthand that he's a very inspiring leader, and I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to say today. Welcome, Elie.
Thank you, Lan. It really was great working with you, and it's so good to be back in touch doing things together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've had a very interesting career journey. You've lived in several countries, you speak 4 languages, and we don't get this a lot, but you graduated from college as an engineer. We don't have that a lot in hospitality. Can you share how you built your successful career and some of the inflection points and factors that you think contributed to your success?
Yeah, thanks, Lan. I'm not sure I'd recommend the path I took to others, but it's worked out well for me. Maybe luck had something to do with it. You talk about building. I think I always was attracted to building things. And so I studied engineering, but I always knew I wanted to go back to business school and get into real estate at the time. So after business school, I spent 10 years in real estate, building mostly higher end homes, but also some shopping centers, office buildings, and a few hotels, some of which are Kimpton hotels today and back in our family as my career has progressed. Then I left that and I moved to travel retail and restaurants with a company that was spinning off from Marriott, HMS Host Corporation. I spent 14 years there, 6 years as CEO. And by then there was a theme developing of working in industries where we were building places that people had experiences. And I just liked the theme, the joy I got from building places where people had life experiences, whether it was homes or retail centers or hotels. And now we're building restaurants and retail in airports around the world and having a good time doing it. But there was a pattern there along. Now, when I got into travel retail, it was also the same customer that we have here in hospitality. They were traveling. We were taking care of them in airports, but in hotels, we sell them a different product, which is room nights. So then when this opportunity came up with IHG, it was really a culmination of all that. Because in hospitality, we're building the ultimate places where people have experiences. They spend more time, way more time in hotels than they do in restaurants or in retails, or they do on airplanes or anywhere else, maybe except for homes. They really care about it a lot. They have their most joyful moments or most important moments, whether for business, for pleasure, happen in hotels around the world. And so hotels really matter to communities, to society, to people individually, to businesses, and to families. And so I think that really was the culmination of this theme of building places where people have experiences. And so I tried to stay to that generally, which didn't mean staying in the same industry or the same company, but staying with something that I really cared and liked. It's easier to be passionate and to work hard at things that you like than at things that you're a bit indifferent on. Now, there's some people for whom that doesn't matter. They can work hard at anything as long as it's got the right title and right pay. That's fine. We need people like that, actually. For me, I've got to be really interested and get a level of joy to what I do. And this theme has been really a guiding theme for me in my career.
That's really great advice. It's actually, it reminds me of when I graduated from college and I said to my dad, I don't know if I'm going to make the most money, but I really want to do the things that I love to do. And he said to me, if you do that, the money will follow. I think this idea of picking something that you really enjoy doing, which hospitality has been for me for 30 plus years, I think that makes a big difference in coming to work every day and enjoying what you do.
And more important than money, happiness will follow, fulfillment will follow. There are a lot of people who get very wealthy doing something very good, very specific, very lucrative, but they wake up 20, 30 years later feeling a hollowness, a lack of fulfillment. And then they start scrambling through social activities and charitable activities to try to get that fulfillment back versus doing it every day. That's a better way, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've had a very successful career, but it's not without its setbacks. Like everybody has challenges. How do you approach a problem? For example, how do you first process it? What tools do you look for? What do you do first when you approach a problem?
I think that's where the engineering background, although I never really practiced beyond 2 years as an engineer, came in handy, which is what you learn for 4 years is problem solving, like every kind of problem. Chemistry problem, physics problem, math problem, engineering problem, design problem. And you also learn that there is actually more than one right answer to a problem. Now, there are many wrong ones, but there's more than one right answer, which opens up your aperture to many different kinds of solutions. So I think first, as you noted, it's kind of understanding, what are you coping with? What is the nature of this problem? Is it a problem with a customer? Is it a problem with an owner? What's not working? What's causing the strain and the stress? What's causing the anxiety around this issue before reacting quickly to it? Now, if it's a fire burning in your basement, maybe yes, you want to react and get the hell out of the house. But usually in business, it's not that. Usually there's some issue that comes up, and the tendencies to throw something at it right away versus let's just break this down a little bit, understand what are we dealing with. The second thing is having a mindset that if it's really important, we can do something about it versus just tolerate it. I got this from my father, who would just never give up on things. Whatever it was, he would always get this keen look in his eye of like, how do we get through this? How do we figure this out? How do we meet somebody or go to some, how do we do something about the situation versus just accepting it? So first, you got to have a bit of an analytical mindset of, let me just break down what's really happening here. And two, a level of strength, a level of conviction that I'm going to find a solution, maybe not to 100% of it. I'm just going to make it better, at least significantly better. I think that combination of conviction and analytics is what I start with. Certainly got to surround yourself with people who can then do that. At some point in your career, you can't be fixing every problem yourself. You're just going to be overwhelmed. You got to have people that have that mindset around you of finding the issues, breaking them down into their core problems, coming up with solutions, and having a mindset of, we can make this better. We don't have to tolerate it.
I love that combination of analytical and persistence, and also surrounding yourself with people who have the mindset to overcome challenges is really great. So I happen to know from working with you that you are always prepared. We pretty much know when we work with you, you've read everything there is to read before you walk into a meeting, and you have an incredible ability to retain facts. Do you have some tips for our viewers on how to stay up to speed on all the reading and knowledge that's required to stay current and lead a company? Where do you seek out resources and guidance when you're looking to grow as a professional?
Well, first I'll confess, Lan, I actually don't read everything.
I find out after all this time. I wish I'd known that before.
I don't have, it's proven, I don't have an ability to read faster than most people. I don't have a photographic memory. I'm very ordinary in those respects. What I have is just a lot of years of experience looking at business material, looking at project material, at things. You are on the deal side of this business. I've been looking at deal evaluation papers or preparations or presentations for 30 years by now. So you know where to look, not so much to look at everything. If you've got a leak in your house and you call somebody to fix it, they're not going to start looking in every corner of the house, right under the bed. And they're going to have a clue about where to look first. And they get that from experience. So I think our experience directs us to where do we actually need to look so that we maximize our ability and our time and that of our team's time. Then when you start to talk about being prepared in general, informed in general about how to approach your business, your industry, how to approach strategy, I'll confess, I don't read a lot of business books, almost none actually. I think that I get most of my information from reading current events. I'll tell you, I read the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times every day, the major elements of those, even into some of the social sections of those, because they're very well written. And I spend my time interacting with people in the industry, people outside of our industry, people at levels of government, people in economics, listening from them. I get a lot more out of that than just reading books. It takes a long time, at least for me, to read a 300-page book. In most of these business books, out of 200-300 pages, there might be 5 to 6 pages of true content. One of those publications that I read will summarize it for you, usually. What I do read that is lengthy are actual novels or history books. I find that I can learn a lot about leadership, about history, and therefore the future from reading books about history. There's so many fabulous books about history, and even fictional books about history in the past that give you insights into leadership. Many things that happened in the past have a lot of current context, and knowing the past can really help you manage the present and the future.
That's really great advice. Do you have a favorite book that you've recently read or that you're reading now on history?
You know, I confess, I'm reading August 1914 by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I had just finished another book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he's just a fabulous writer. This book is 600 pages. I'm chewing my way through it, but it is very relevant to what's going on today in the world, actually, and amazingly current and similar to what's going on in the world. I won't get into specifics, but it's a captivating book. I wish I had more time. It weighs so much I can't carry it around. I don't like to read on digital devices. I like to read the actual books so I don't get interrupted by messages or notifications that keep flying through. There's no joy reading if you get interrupted every third sentence.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you that he's a terrific author from the past, but has had a huge impact on civilization in the present.
I love that. Not just the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, but reading history for lessons for today. And I love how relevant you're finding that to situations that we have now. So one of the things that we found is that we tend to be our own biggest critics, which can make us doubt ourselves and our skills. What are some of the strategies that you use to stay positive and to overcome that internal narrative?
Look, it's so easy to get down at any level in an organization, especially in this hyper social media society where you're constantly aware of everybody else's successes because nobody's posting their failures, only their successes. And it's guaranteed you're surrounded by people who are better at things than you, faster readers, smarter, more handsome, better athletes, harder work, whatever. You're going to be surrounded by that. So if you focus just on your relative attributes, it's going to drive you crazy. And it probably does, especially many of our young generation. I do get worried about them, paranoid about other people's successes that they read in social media, if they're even true. Versus, I think what's comforting for me when I face the same sort of insecurities is focusing on what really matters to me, which is there is the game of business for me. But it is still business, and it's still a bit of a game. It's a very serious game. It's only when I'm halfway decent at, by the way. I'm not competent in any other athletic activity or art or music or anything. The things that really matter to me, my family, my friends, their health, our time together, those are generally unaltered by those things. And so when I find myself really in doubt, I focus on, okay, does that really affect that? Am I being affected in that respect? Versus, okay, in the game of business, I may win or lose a little more today, which I take very seriously. But at the center of my life, there are other things that really matter. And I think that's really important for so many people today to be centered in things that aren't just about their work or their profession or whatever they dedicate themselves to, because you're going to need those centers when something isn't going well. And it invariably will not go well in that professional career. And if everything is around your work or your profession or your sport, you have nowhere to go after that. When your team loses, when your company struggles, when your performance isn't what you want it to be, when you lose a deal that you worked hard at, you're going to go far lower than you should be going. Versus having a floor that says, okay, we lost this game. We didn't perform as well as we should have. But you know what? I've got other things in my life that keep me balanced and centered and give me the ability to reboot and reload and come back in a more competitive way versus just keep descending in loss. That's something that we find is very important, is having other things in your life that matter.
That's such great advice. I know when I was younger in my career, it was all 100% work, and it just left me really unbalanced when things didn't go well. So just focusing on your values and finding a way to center yourself so that it isn't all work is really a great way to help you recover when things don't go well. I love that. So a common generalization is that women don't always do a good job of advocating for themselves. What would you tell our viewers who are struggling to find their voice and to get something that they really want?
It could be generalization. I don't see it or really believe it. Maybe it was some time ago. I I don't really think it's the case broadly. It probably is still the case in some areas. Look, ultimately, in business, we're all in the job of persuasion. We're all trying to persuade somebody to do something. Initially, you're trying to persuade an organization to hire you. Then you're trying to persuade that organization's clients or customers or owners or whatever it may be to buy your product or service. Then you're trying to persuade your investors to fund your ideas and your projects, and your team to follow you, and your boss to promote you, and on and on. So even when you're not in sales, direct sales, you're in the business of persuasion. The nice thing about persuasion, it can be done in many different ways. And so whether it's women or men, I think it's a question of stepping back and understanding, how am I going to persuade? And not starting with, this is what I want. Okay, this is what you want. You want this promotion. You want this account. You want this assignment. You want this raise. Whatever it may be, you want this investment in your idea. Understood. But now go to the other side. Who are you trying to persuade? And what is going to be persuasive to them? Put yourself in that place. And then write your narrative of, how am I going to be persuasive? Not just saying, I want this, or this is why it's good for me, or this is why I deserve this, or it's time to me to do this, or somebody else got this, or they do it at another company. All the things that you hear people say, they're not persuasive. What's persuasive is, why is this really good for our customers and clients, good for our organization, and you're the best at it. Now that's a case of persuasion. And I think women do it very well, at least the ones that I'm surrounded by here at IHG, including yourself when you were here. And I think it's irrespective of gender. That's what I think people should start with.
And it's really great tactical advice of thinking about how it's going to be received on the other side when you're trying to advocate for yourself. I always found it a lot easier to advocate on behalf of my company than I did for myself. But you alluded to it just now. Let's talk a little bit about some women in leadership, because you have a number of really great women leaders in your organization, but women's styles can be different than men's. If you think of a traditional leader, you might envision a man who is very ambitious and hard charging. And those kinds of behaviors are not really well received coming from women. So what are some of the characteristics or leadership styles do you see or look for in women and underrepresented groups that you come into contact with, that would indicate to you they could be a really great leader?
Yeah, I'll answer that. But first I'd say, I think that's also this perception that a more assertive, let's not say aggressive, more assertive style is not well received. May still be lingering, but it's really not the norm anymore. I think people are looking at the argument you're making, at what you bring, at how persuasive you are, whether they want to invest in you or your ideas, much more so than who it's coming from. And there may be some relic of organizations out there that are still doing that. They probably won't be very successful for much longer, if they've been at all. But what I look for is a number of traits, and it could be more than people think about. But when we talk about leaders now, we're not talking about just great foot soldiers and executors and doers. Now we're talking leaders. Leaders like you were, leaders that will rise further and further in the organization and replace us all at some point. Male or female, whatever ethnicity, I'm really looking for 5 or 6 traits, and I'll name them to you. And then your listeners or watchers or readers can do with them as they wish. Fundamentally, the first thing I'm looking for is for a good, conscientious person and human being. Are you just a good person? Somebody that has integrity, somebody that will do what they say, somebody's dependable, conscientious. There's no working your way with other attributes if that's not at the core. Then it's very important for me that you demonstrate the fact that you're a hardworking individual with a strong intellect. Very hard to get around that. Yeah, there are a few prodigies who can get away with very little work, or very not prodigies that can make up for with hard work. You need a combination of both for 99%, including myself. We're going to be ordinary in intellect. We're going to have to work very hard and make sacrifices, not life-changing sacrifices, but demonstrable ones. Good judgment and courage. Can't substitute that. As a leader, you're making decisions. Are most of your decisions good decisions, sound decisions? They may not work out to the right outcome every time, but at the time that you made that decision, was it the right decision given everything that we knew or should have known? And then do you have the courage to carry it out, or do you just recoil right away in fear of execution or fear of failure? Do you have the courage? Do you have the judgment to make the right decision, which comes from experience in many cases? But you have that innate courage to take it forward. Because if your team and your clients and your boards, etc., people around you don't sense that you have the courage to execute, they're not going to follow you. They're not going to want to invest in you. They can sense it. They can feel it, smell it. They can scent it out. Are you strategic, not just a doer? If we're talking about leadership, you got to have some strategic ability to map out the context, see the general direction of things, be able to project a little more forward, understand the major drivers and causes and effects versus just execute. The last I'd say, and that's unrelated to all the above, but very important for me, is do you bring joy to the job? Or do you just bring task and drive? There's a difference between drive and joy. You need both. The previous 5 elements will demonstrate you have drive and ability and competence and integrity. But you bring joy. And joy doesn't mean constant celebration, going out all the time, champagne glasses and pizza parties. No. Those have a role. Joy means, are you visibly fulfilled, engaged, satisfied in what you're doing, although you may have some really bad days for a good reason. You lost this big account or big deal, you better not be happy today. But are you fulfilled in what you're doing? Do people feel like you're here with purpose and reason versus just knocking the years out and the days out? Great leaders bring a level of joy to their job and fulfillment. Those are my sort of general attributes that I look for, and I'm still working to fulfill a few of them myself.
Those are really great. Thank you. I really appreciate your sharing that list with us. It's a great list. I think I'm going to go back and reflect on them a little more afterwards. Let's talk a little bit about advocates and mentors. How important is it to find advocates and mentors if you want to get ahead, and how does one go about it?
It's important. It's not, I'd say, essential, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't have advocates and mentors if you can. Why not? Most people that got places have somebody there that helped them. Didn't give them an unreasonable advantage, but noticed their talent and made sure it wasn't unnoticed by others. We don't know who those great people behind those great leaders are. They're not the ones that get mentioned, but they're there, and you may know in our industry who were the people behind the people. So it's really good to have them, although many people make it without mentors or advocates. They just plow forward by sheer persistence, and that's a great attribute too. Sometimes you find mentors, sometimes they find you. I think in a great organization, they're finding you. And that's what we spend a lot of time at IHG, is actually going ourselves as leaders to find the leaders of the future. We have a program where we're mentoring a broad range of future leaders, from the executive level all the way to our regional leadership level, having specific mentorship programs. I mentor 2 people, meet with them frequently. Then we have an Ascend program. We call it the Ascend program of future leaders, a class twice a year. We have a class that's got 30 to 40 ethnic minority, young future leaders in it, helping them, developing them, mentoring them for their next positions. So I think in a growing, successful organization, mentors are finding the future leaders, not waiting to be found, because that becomes a bit random. Were you at the meeting with that person? Were you on that trip with the person? Were you not noticed? It just, a lot of times you're leaving it up to coincidence then. In my case, I had the good fortune of having 2, 3 people along my multi-year journey who just gave me some really good advice at a point in time and said, you know what, you should go for that opportunity. Or here's how you can be successful at this. It wasn't breaking doors down at all, but those little snippets of advice, which seem extremely obvious today, weren't obvious to me at that junior level at the time. Or because I had my head so buried in what I was doing, I was missing that there's this other thing that we should really think about doing after doing 3 or 4 years at this. And those nudges along the way were pivotal in my career. Today, I think how we can build on that is being more intentional, as we say today in corporate America, more intentional in doing that versus let it happen by happenstance. That's how I think we're going to build a broader field of leaders for the future.
That's great. So speaking about having a broader group of people in the future, we've talked about how diversity can be more than just race and gender. It can be diversity of thought. It can be diversity of cultures. And you've worked internationally. So you've worked with teams from very diverse cultures that might have different ways of thinking and working, but they can be a challenge to manage if people approach things very differently. How do you approach managing diverse teams so that those diverse people feel that they're being heard?
If we're going to be, and that is where we are, and we want to continue to be better at it, a global, multi-brand, multi-segment hospitality company in over 100 countries with even hundreds of more languages in those countries and cultures, we're going to have to be masters at that, right? We can't be successful when your customers and your owners and your colleagues in all these markets come from so many different cultures. Just here in the Americas, we're 24 countries. We're sitting in the US today, but we're one of 24 countries in this Americas region, pole to pole, that are very different, even within the United States. The cultural diversity is immense. It's not a very homogeneous country, given its growth as a nation of immigrants. So I guess I come to it a little more naturally, having lived abroad and lived in many different cultures. I lived on 4 continents and speak the languages you mentioned, or still try to. So for me, it's a little more natural to be open to their different approaches. Part of it is having them in your organization, having your workforce reflect that multicultural, multinational diversity of your business, which ours is. And then that comes more naturally because then people observe it. It's very hard to me to teach it. I think you learn it more by observation. If your teams are a little more multicultural, multinational, diverse, multi-ethnic, then people will see it in play and learn from it. Sure, we have our diversity training, our unconscious bias training. Those are moments, hours, versus days and years of being part of teams, part of organizations where you're listening to different accents, you're hearing about different cultures, you're observing different manners. In some parts of the world, if you, let's say in the Western world, when you're communicating with somebody, you're expected to look at them in the eye. You don't want to be looking away, right? That's a sign of not just respect, but also confidence and interest and attention. In some other parts of the world, it's not polite to be looking somebody straight in the eyes when you first engage with them. And you only learn that from being around people. We're not going to teach you that in a class, but we have as you recall, a very large, multinational, multicultural, diverse population, even here in Atlanta where we are. And I think people learn from that. And then when others come up with their own solutions, their own ideas, but approaching it in a different way, as long as they're displaying the leadership attributes we talked about, as long as they have been analytical in their approach to a problem, but also persistent in their preparation and persuasive in their arguments, there are many different ways to do it for many different cultures. That's, I think, essential if we're going to be a successful multi-brand, multi-segment global company in over 100 countries.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Not everyone has a chance to work with such an international group, but I think it does really inform one way of approaching working with a diverse group, just with people who are very different from you. So one of our favorite questions at EI Advisors is, what advice would you give to your younger self? And I think we've decided among ourselves that it changes as you go through life and you have different things that are going on with your life. But I'm just curious right now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
From a professional point of view, I've been very fortunate, more than I deserve. I think the one thing I would say today, after having spent this my 8th year in this industry at IHG, is I wish I'd joined this industry sooner. I was in great industries before in real estate, then travel retail. I don't think I learned a ton, all of which helps me today. Clearly, understanding about real estate is fundamental to what we do in hospitality, even on the brand side. Travel retail was a great preparation for this. It got me closer to the customer, to branding, to international business, a formative experience. But this industry is on a broader scale, a bigger scale, a more durable trajectory with incredible tailwinds of growth globally. I just wish I'd gotten here sooner. So I wish somebody had nudged me to say, hey, you're doing well where you are. You're close enough to this industry. You got to get into it now. Instead of 8 years ago, 15 years ago would have probably been a better. But I'm not complaining. I've had a great time here. I just wish I'd got here sooner.
It is a wonderful industry. It really is. All right, so we are running short on time. I knew I could actually talk to you for a really long time, but as we get close to the end, DEI Advisor's mission, as you might know, is empowering personal success. And along those lines, do you have a final bit of advice that you would leave with our viewers who are looking to advance their careers?
Look, we talked about persuasion earlier, and I'll touch on it a little bit, then I'll touch on a couple other things too. There are some true fundamentals, but there's no side and only a lot of upside to mastering the skill of persuasion. If you look at some of the most successful leaders, even in our industry, they're very persuasive in very different ways. They're not salespeople. Not only do they know their material well, whatever the topic is, but they're very convincing. And they're convincing not because they're telling you why they're really good at something. They're convincing because they're telling you why what they're telling you is important for you, why it matters to you, what can make you better, make you money, make you more successful, whatever your interest is, they're speaking to what your needs are. So I'd say, let's go back and make sure that you understand the skill of persuasion. And which is, yes, sales is part of it, but corporate persuasion is broader and essential to your career. Then I'd say, whatever level of position you're in, there are 3 things that generally propel people forward, short of working for the family that owns the business. That I can't change for you. But absent that, at any level, first, be a master at that role, whatever it is. Be the go-to person. Like when it's something around this topic, this product, this issue, this area, are you the go-to person? Like Lan, you were the go-to person in your area. Like if there was an issue around this type of situation, go to Lan. So you want to be the go-to person. Second, after you've mastered your abilities in your area, help others be successful. That takes you into leadership. Helping others be successful. Don't just compete with others, which you're at some point you're always competing, right? But don't focus on the fact you're competing with others. Focus on how you're helping them succeed. When you're doing that, you're becoming a leader. You're earning capital in the organization that people will notice above and above. And third, stretch yourself a little further. Do more than the necessary. Do more than the required. Get involved in a few things beyond social, charitable, in sort of professional things for your company, the special projects, taking that effort a little bit further, solving problems nobody asked you to solve, answering questions nobody asked you to answer. That really gets people's attention. There's a lot more here with this person. They're always thinking ahead. They're ahead, not only thinking ahead, they're thinking ahead of us. That's a leader. When you're thinking ahead of your own leaders, when you're helping other people around you succeed, when they see you as a master at your own role, now you've built a lot of fuel that's going to rocket you up.
That's really amazing advice. Really great things to think about for our viewers. So thank you so much, Elie, for your wonderful advice and your wonderful insights. I so enjoyed working with you, and I'm so glad that to be able to share your insights and your knowledge and experience with our viewers. So thank you for being on.
Thank you for
And
having me on,
for
Lan. It's great to reconnect with
absolutely,
you.
absolutely. And for our viewers, if you enjoyed this interview and would like to see other great interviews, I hope you'll join us at deiadvisors.org, which is our website where you can find more videos. Thank you so much.